Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Luke Simons with Bryan Independent School District Superintendent Tommy Wallis. And first of all, Dr. Wallis, thank you so much for joining us. There is a bond that is going to be on this year's election. November 4th, it's a day we all know about the election, and we know some of the people that are going to be involved. But one of the things for the people in Bryan is that there is this bond issue, $132 million. It's going to do a lot of different things for the Bryan Independent School District. And that's what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes. Now, first of all, Dr. Wallis, why don't we just start off talking about how this kind of came into fruition? It's obviously something that for you guys doesn't just happen overnight. You don't come asking for a lot of money for no reason.
Right.
So just talk about how this started and what you guys are kind of hoping to get out of this.
Yes, sir. 2 years ago, we had a district initiative to go through with a strategic plan. And through that strategic plan, the Board of Trustees, other employees were asked to give us names and recommendations of community members, parents, other employees to go through and do a strategic plan for Bryan ISD. As you know, any organization needs a plan, needs a direction. So we came up with a strategic plan. One of the 5 tenets that we talked about, one of them was facilities. And so really the initiative started 2 years ago with a strategic plan with a cross-section of community members all throughout Bryan.
Now, it's a $132 million bond, and you guys broke it up basically into 4 different points is what I'm seeing. You've got grade realignment, construction, consolidating properties, and then also repairs. I guess one of the things people are going to be interested off the top is the grade realignment.
Sure.
First of all, before we talk about the specifics, why do something like grade realignment? Why would that work in this type of situation?
Well, it's interesting. The facilities committee began talking about grade realignment, and so the facilities conversation turned to academics and academic success. What they talked about was that 5th grade students don't really belong with pre-K and kindergarten students, and so to give a little more historic context to that, we have right now 15 pre-K or kindergarten through 5th grade schools. We have 4 middle schools, grades 6 through 8, and we have our 4 high schools. Now our 2 traditional, Bryan and Rudder, and then our Bryan Collegiate and Mary Catherine School of Choice. But as the committee began to unearth this and began to uncover different things and ask different questions, it really came back to the fact of academics and where our 5th grade students are and where our 6th grade students are. 5th grade students, really, if you think about it, they are going through and they're growing at a pretty rapid rate. They're going through all the changes in their bodies, and they're becoming little adults. They really don't belong, according to our research and all that, they belong, but they really are better suited, I should say, to be with middle school or intermediate type grades, 5th and 6th grade.
Right.
The 5th grade students are really in the same school with our kindergartners who walk down the hall with a hug and a bubble. And what that means is you walk around and you get the bubble in the cheek. But what they said was, let's look at letting our 5th graders begin to grow. Let's look at making those individuals begin to flourish, become little adults. And so the 5th grade to an intermediate school. Then our 6th grade students, many people don't really want their 6th grade student, their 11-year-old, their 12-year-old with 8th graders. Right. And then if you really begin to study the data, you see that 6th grade students have a large number of office referrals. They get in trouble for tardies. And the reason for that is they go from a very structured environment, which is in elementary school, to a very non-structured secondary type campus. Right. So the committee brought to the board, and the board approved a grade realignment resolution, which would put our 5th grade students and our 6th grade students together. So now our 6th grade students can begin to grow up, learn how to walk down the hallways without being thrown into, if you will, the deep end and having those kids walk through the hallways unattended. The second part of that is the academic end is 5th grade students in Bryan can go to any one of the 4 middle schools that we have currently. We have the Inquire program that you can apply for, the Odyssey program, we have the Kickstart program. So really our 5th grade students can really attend any of the 4. The problem with that is that 5th grade teachers, and we have 15 elementary schools, talking to that 6th grade teacher about those 5th grade students' academic success, where the students are struggling, it's virtually impossible. Right. And so we really felt like that if we had a 5th and 6th grade campus, then what you would see is more vertical alignment, more conversation about how to make those 5th graders and 6th graders more successful academically.
Got it. So for the people at home who are watching, the understanding is you're going to have elementary school is now going to be your pre-K through 4th grade. Your intermediate level is going to be 5th and 6th grade. Middle school is now 7th and 8th, and then the high schools stay unchanged.
Remain the same.
So
yes,
obviously people are going to say, okay, we know which schools are what. We've got elementary schools and middle schools. Where do the intermediate schools now come in? So why don't you just talk about how you're planning to kind of realign that a little bit and where these kids will kind of shift a little bit if they're in that in-between state?
One of the things we'll do is, as I said, we will go from 15 elementary schools to 14. The issue with that is that people have asked, well, which school is being closed down and why? So basically, Milam Elementary School will be reconfigured to our Mary Catherine Harris School of Choice. Right. And the reason that the committee came up with that decision was that Milam, if you visit it, is really 3 different buildings. Our kids go out at the elementary school level are going outside. They go outside to music, to the library, to the office. They're outside. It's more conducive and set up for a secondary type campus. So what we'll have to do, if the bond does pass, we'll have to realign our zones. So that means that if you go from 15 to 14 elementary schools, we're going to have to rezone our district. And so that always causes a little anxiety when you begin talking about rezoning elementary school students. So we will have to rezone, but whether the bond passes or whether the bond doesn't pass, Bryan ISD is going to have to look at rezoning. It's been 17 years since Bryan ISD has rezoned elementary schools, and so what you now have is pockets of children have moved throughout our community. So we have schools like, for instance, Sul Ross currently has roughly 300, I think it's 310 kids. But then you have Jones Elementary, you have Milam Elementary, Kemp Carver. They're busting at the seams. So whether the bond passes or whether it fails, Bryan ISD is going to have to revisit the idea of rezoning.
Right. That's obviously something that everyone's going to be very interested once that kind of happens. Now let's move on to the next part. I mean, when you have a bond, obviously construction is going to be a very big part of that, and that's what we're looking at next. I guess let's first of all talk about the amount, the $132 million. It's going to cover all these 4 different things. The reality is it's 6 cents per $100 is your tax impact, and we've talked about it, which means that's $60 for a $100,000 home, $180 for the entire year for a $300,000 home. Just talk about where that kind of number came from, and obviously we will also break this down a little bit more with new schools and things like that, but where you guys kind of came from that. What
we did was we began to, as we unpacked the entire facilities study from PBK, we began to look at all the 1s and looked at all the 2s. And when you look at the entire report from PBK Architects, you'll find that if you really did everything that the architects found that needed to be upgraded, it'd be a $300 million bond.
I'm sure they'd love that.
Yeah, I bet they would. I bet they would. Well, we're not going to go $300 million, but as we get, the 132 came with us talking to our attorneys, talking to our facilities committee about what they felt like the top priorities were, and that's where the 132 came. Okay. It is 6 cents per $100 of value. It's important to note that 65-year-old individuals and older, their homes themselves, their tax rate remains frozen on their homestead, and so their taxes remain the same whether they vote yes, whether they vote no. And so it's important that, now I've had people ask me that question, Luke, that said, well, why should a 65-year-old, why should I vote for it? And the answer I give them is that somebody did it for them at one other time in their life, and we need to pass that along. It's that pay it forward mentality. Right.
So now let's talk a little bit more about this new construction. Sure. Obviously, I think when people see this, one of the biggest ones is going to be a new Stephen F. Austin Middle School.
Right.
Talk about that, how that's going to happen. And it's also going to lead to other things at the existing Stephen F.
Sure.
Austin. There's going to be a lot going on over there.
Well, the Stephen F. Austin current building was built in 1938. 10 cents a gallon was what it cost in 1938 for gas, and of course now here we are at $3 a gallon. So things have changed. In fact, we got a postcard in from a gentleman in New York City that Stephen F. Austin in 1938 was built and furnished for $350,000.
Wow.
So you can see times have changed. But Stephen F. Austin, one of the things that people have asked are you going to tear down the building? And the answer is absolutely not. It's a historic building. It's a beautiful building, but it has served its purpose in terms of educating children. 71% of the classes in Stephen F. Austin currently are below the TEA standard of 700 square feet. Okay. So when you begin to look at that, people have said, well, why don't you remodel? Well, a lot of those classes are made of masonry brick. And so you can't just tear those down and do that over the summer. So the committee came up with the idea of let's rebuild a Stephen F. Austin on that current site. So the old Bronco gym, the new gym, if you will, which is our auxiliary gym, and the civic auditorium are all going to remain right where they're at. But what we're going to do is take our academic wing, we're going to take our career and technology wing, our fine arts wing, we're going to add all those under one roof. And it's going to attach basically from Stephen F. Austin's, or excuse me, from civic auditorium all the way back here like an L shape back to Bronco gym. Now, there's been some people ask me the question, well, now, Dr. Wallis, how many stories is this building going to be? Well, it's 3 stories. And I've heard people say, well, we don't want a 3-story building on our property. Right. Well, Stephen F. Austin currently is 3 stories. So to let people know, it's not going to be some skyscraper out there, but it's going to be a 3-story building that's going to attach basically from Civic Auditorium back around to Bronco Gym.
And since we're on that plot of land, let's talk about what happens to the current Stephen F. Austin Middle School, a whole new plan for that campus.
Well, that campus will be refurbished, if you will, into a central administration. And I've heard people ask the question, well, there's too many administrators in schools anyway. Well, the fact remains that, you know, in Texas, the average number of campus administrators of the budget is 2.9%. Bryan is at 2.3%. So we're below the state average in our our campus administration. Then you have a 1% average in Texas for central office staff, which would be superintendent, assistant superintendent, and central office people. In Bryan, currently, it's not 1%, it's 0.6%. So we don't have an overabundance, or called top-heavy, if you will. We don't have that. Right. But what we are going to do is take that old existing building, we are going to change it and refurbish it, if you will, to a central office location. Now, it's not going to be any big Taj Mahal. It's the central office. The money needs to go where the kiddos are, where the students are, where the classes are going to be. But we are going to take the current building that we have on Boonville and Texas Avenue. We are going to move it to Stephen F. Austin, the old one. Okay. We're going to take our special education department. We'll relocate it to the old SFA. Now, why is that so important? Well, it's housed currently at Bryan Collegiate High School. Well, Bryan Collegiate High School over the past 2 years has been ranked as one of the top 1,000 high schools in the entire country. I mean, we're very proud of Bryan Collegiate, but we're trying to grow that program. And as we grow that program, there's no place to grow that program because special education is in that building. Okay. So it'll be relocated to our central administration building.
Right. I guess the next big thing that people are going to see is Sul Ross Elementary. That's going to be completely rebuilt. So talk about what's going to happen there, how that's going to happen a little bit.
Sure. Well, Sul Ross Elementary School was built in a time that we had less fear of people entering and coming into your schools and doing things they shouldn't be doing. Everything opens pretty much to the outside. There's 3 wings at Sul Ross, and of those 3 wings, they have to go outside for every single class, or excuse me, for every time they go to the office, to the counselor, to the library. They actually go outside. It's not good for them to be exposed to the elements. It's not good because we send students in groups of 2 or 3 to the office, to the nurse, to the counselor. And so the current Sul Ross Elementary School will be rebuilt on that property. It will be built first, and then the old Sul Ross will be razed or torn down. But the property is in such a way that we can build that school without hurting the instructional integrity of the classrooms. So we'll build the new Sul Ross, and then once it's built, then we'll tear down the old. And so it can be done in roughly 12, 13, 14 months.
Got it. Next thing I'm going to talk about, repurposing Milam Elementary.
Yes.
That's going to be an interesting one. You kind of talked about it a little bit, but talk about what's going to happen there at Milam Elementary.
Sure. Milam Elementary School will be refurbished into our Mary Catherine School of Choice. Now, Mary Catherine Harris, if you look at the instructional process there, I really think that type of a school is going to be something that's going to be thought about across Texas. It is for overaged, undercredited students. Right. Overaged, undercredited by choice of their own, choice not of their own, but that school needs to grow as well. And it is currently in the old hospital and doctor's office back behind the Lamar campus. And so those two buildings will also be sold as we move Milam over. Milam has in it has the GED program, it has our computer-based credit recovery type program, it will house our DAEP, our Disciplinary Alternative Education program. But I really want the voters to understand, Milam being an alternative school does not mean those kids are bad children. Right. It is for students who are not being successful in our traditional setting. And so when people hear alternative school, I think they have a negative connotation that means discipline, and that's not the case. It is truly an alternative to the traditional setting.
And I know one of the other things that you're looking at, and one of the things you talked about earlier, is that the amount of space that you're supposed to have, that they say you're supposed to have for a certain amount of kids. And right now, the reality is there are also kids in portables that are going, things like that. You're hoping to kind of make it so that they're all in that school setting. Talk about some of those changes that might happen, because there are portables around and things like that. And you're hoping that all the kids are going to be able to be on those sites at all the different locations.
Well, for the viewers, part of the initiative of this bond is to do away with all portable buildings. Portable buildings are not long-term fixes. They're short-term solutions to a long-term problem. And so we are trying to do away with all of our portable buildings, but each school in the district will receive an upgrade or an addition. For example, we have 9 schools that are going to receive additions. We have Rudder, Mitchell, Henderson, Crockett, Kemp Carver, Jones, Davila, Sam Rayburn, and Jane Long. All are going to get additional classrooms, but every school in the building, or every building in the district, every school will get upgrades of some sort, except Neal. And it's important for the voters to know that we just spent $3.5 million this past summer renovating Neal Elementary School. So they've had an upgrade, and they're up to date, they're up to code, they're good, and so Neal won't get anything out of this bond.
And you mentioned all those schools, so that, I mean, people also need to understand every single school except for Neal, like you said, who just went through that, is getting an upgrade. It's pretty amazing to think that every single school is going to see something in some way. And I know they listed those as priority 1. So a lot of things like HVAC repairs, technology infrastructure, roof replacements, and things like that. Talk about those types of things that are going to end up helping these students, especially things like technology. Right. Especially, that's the way every single thing is going. You know,
what people think when they think about a bond is they think a new school, they think some type of cosmetic. Some of this money at some of these schools are priority 1s, which are, like you said, HVAC systems, it's plumbing, it's some of the things that our maintenance department have done a great job, but it's something that they just can't keep up with over time. And so what we have here is schools are going to get new air conditioners, they're going to get the new plumbing as we talked about. So not every school is going to see cosmetics. We just replaced a chiller at Bryan High School. Well, that's over $300,000. We replaced roofs at Sam Houston and Branch Elementary School. That's close to $1 million with 2 roofs. So what you're going to see are things like new roofs at Fannin Elementary School. You may see some things of concrete and ADA accessibility at certain elementary schools where over time the concrete is shifted. So it's really going to be an opportunity for us to get up to code in some of these areas, but priority 1s and 2s in this bond package, some of them aren't going to be visible to the mother and the father who drop off their kid. But I promise you, if the air conditioner goes out, if the plumbing doesn't work, if something like that happens, they let us know that. And so it's important to understand that the maintenance of schools are very important to the instructional setting of our schools.
For the people that are at home and they're watching this and they hear you say certain things about certain campuses being changed and certain things, and then they go, well, what are you going to do with maybe a place that it sounds like might be vacant? Well, there's going to be also a plan for that. Talk about some of those instances where things
Sure.
are going to also change and how that's going to help the district in a way.
It will. What we're trying to do is get out of the building business, if you will. We have a lot of we have our transportation department needs some upgrades. Our facility where our land, our yard crew goes, whether the bond passes or not, we're going to get rid of that building. We're going to sell it because they need more space and they need a better facility. But any facility that we have that is going to be relocated to central office, like technology services will be relocated to Stephen F. Austin. We'll sell that building. We will sell Mary Catherine Harris, which is the old hospital we talked about earlier, as well as the doctor's office. We'll sell those buildings. We will sell the building we're in currently over off Texas Avenue. That money will then go back into the general fund, because if you go back, remember the bond would be $300 million if we were to touch all the areas that need to be touched. So we will take that money that has been sold of excess properties, put that back into the general fund, and then we will be able to fix more of those ones and twos.
Playing devil's advocate again, I guess a little bit, for the people who wonder, well, why couldn't you do that in the first place? Why can't you do that in the first place? Or
Yes.
do these buildings have to exist before you can do that sort of thing?
Sure. And the reason that you can't do those things currently is because of the state funding system. Several bienniums ago, the state legislature cut our funding from $1.50 to the very max of $1.04. And so when that happened, states all across or districts all across Texas have struggled with financing. And it cost a great deal of money to renovate these buildings. And it really, even though we have a facilities long-range plan, it's still a long-range plan. And what I would like the voters to understand is that we are tied to the Houston market. And so you have Cy-Fair Independent School District just passed a bond for over $1 billion with a B. You have Houston that just passed one with a B, over $1 billion. You have Fort Bend, and you also have Katy going out for large sums of money for their schools. But through that, we're tied to that market. And so what people need to understand is every year we don't get these ones and twos addressed and fixed. The amount of money it's going to cost to fix them later on is just going to continually rise. And so we need to be thoughtful as we go through our long-range planning, through this bond even, to make for sure that we have a good strategic plan as we move forward to keep these facilities updated.
Let's start with the next question. Why should parents or anyone who has a student in Bryan Independent School District, let's start with them, why should they vote for this bond? What should they expect from something like this for their kids who are going to your schools and things like that?
Well, I think that when you look at facilities, I think that the reason a parent would want to vote, and again, all I can really tell you is facts. I really can't tell you how to vote or why to vote. I can just give you the facts. But the facts are that, for instance, Stephen F. Austin, classrooms are very full. And of course, as well as the board and everybody else in the community wants smaller class sizes and more teachers. We all want that in a perfect world. But then where are we going to put them? And we have to put them in a portable building. And so what the parent is going to see is at SFA, they're going to see larger classes. We're going to see more technological integration into our classrooms because there's money for technology in this for those schools that are getting upgrades. You're going to see a grade realignment that's going to help and benefit students socially, that's going to help them psychologically and academically. You're going to see that when we do this grade realignment that we're going to work for the 5th and 6th grade campuses to be as much staffed as we can possibly staff it, like a small middle school. So we will have a true feeder system where one school will go to Rudder High School and one school will go to Bryan High School. What does that mean to the people out there? Well, it means that we can start in 5th grade and 6th grade teaching students band, orchestra, athletics, UI academics, all of our UIL programs can start now not in just 5th grade or 6th grade, but also back up to 5th grade. So there's going to be a true feeder system in our district starting in 7th grade. And I think that creates a sense of ownership. It creates a sense of pride that I'm going to be a Ranger or I'm going to be a Viking. And I think it creates pride in our schools as well.
So for the other people who may not have grandkids, children, anybody who's in the Bryan Independent School District, what do you tell them? Why is this important to just a normal person who doesn't have kids that are in Bryan Independent School District?
Sure. And I say 2 things to that. Number one, I say somebody did it for you when you went to school. And again, it's that pay it forward. Second, you're talking about economic development. You're talking about when people come in and begin to do the work in the Bryan School District. They're going to come in and they're going to stay here. We are going to ask that our contract manager at risk, whoever that might be, hire as many local subcontractors as at all possible, because we want to give back to those people who are going to be voting, hopefully yes, on the bond. And so the next thing, I've talked to some owners of some businesses around SFA, and they've said to me that we feel like with the traffic flow that will come through the SFA Central Administration Office could boost their businesses. So I think you see a situation of it's going to boost our economy. It's going to help in terms of Bryan's marketability, if you will. When people come in, they look at the schools. When people move into the Bryan College Station area, they look at the schools and they want to see what they look like. And if they are what they look like, are they well kept, which we're doing a good job of, but are they updated? And so I think all those things will help bring a better economy even to Bryan.
Now, of course, we've talked about a lot of different things and all these things that are going on. This is actually all put on the Bryan Independent School District website. Yes. Just tell people, you know, we're running out of time, a little over a minute left, but what they can expect if they want to go and see it.
Sure.
And understand all of the things that we have been talking about.
Right. If you'll go to www.bryanisd.org, on any website in our district, whether it's the schools or the district, in the top right-hand corner, you'll see an icon or a link to the BISD or bond information. So please go to that. We have a virtual tour of a few of our schools on there as well. All the information, the frequently asked questions, and their answers there. So we encourage everybody to go to that website.
Obviously, this is a very big bond, $132 million. And the most important thing is you get to vote on it. The people of Bryan get to go and they get to decide. So that will happen on November 4th. Go out and vote. You can decide, you know, whether you agree or disagree. Right. Either way, that is what the people want. And so we'll just have to kind of wait until November 4th.
Absolutely. That's right.
Dr. Wallis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And of course, we'll keep an eye on this and see what happens on Election Day.